The lights dimmed inside the Grand Theatre of Ireland's Got Talent, and the crowd quieted to a hush. A small figure stepped out from behind the curtain, his tiny shadow stretching across the gleaming stage floor. He was no taller than the piano waiting in the spotlight, barefoot, with a shirt a size too big and patches of dust on his knees. His name was Enzo, a 4-year-old boy from the narrow streets of Manila, Philippines. The audience looked confused at first. What could a child that small possibly do on such a huge stage? Enzo's mother watched from the side, her trembling hands clutching a small rosary. She had worked as a cleaner for months to save enough for their tickets to Ireland, selling even her wedding ring to make the dream possible. The little boy had never played a grand piano before, only a broken keyboard they found in a junkyard, missing several keys. But somehow he had learned to make music from it, as if each missing key had taught him another way to express his heart. Simon Cowell leaned forward, his expression skeptical but curious. Amanda Holden smiled gently, whispering something to Alicia Dixon, who was already wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. The host gave Enzo a small nod of encouragement. The little boy took a deep breath, climbed onto the piano bench with both hands for balance, and let his tiny fingers hover above the keys. The first note trembled, soft, uncertain. The audience leaned in. Then, suddenly, the melody grew stronger, the rhythm pulsing like a heartbeat. His fingers moved across the keys, as though they had a life of their own. Each note was filled with emotion, telling stories words could never express, stories of hunger, rain, soaked nights, and quiet dreams beneath the stars of Manila. The sound was pure magic. The judges' faces shifted from disbelief to wonder. Simon's eyes softened, Amanda's lips quivered. The entire room seemed to fade away, leaving only Enzo and his piano. The audience forgot that he was just a child. They heard only the soul of a master. Every phrase he played was a prayer, every chord a memory of his struggle. The music reached its climax, strong, beautiful, heartbreaking. Then, with one final note, Enzo stopped. For a second there was silence, and then the entire theater erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, shouting and clapping, some even crying. Enzo looked up, startled, his small chest rising and falling. He turned to see Simon Cowell standing and clapping, something few contestants ever saw. Amanda covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Alicia whispered softly, "That's not talent, that's a miracle." Enzo blinked in confusion, his tiny hands still resting on the piano. His mother ran to the stage, pulling him into her arms. The crowd cheered even louder. Under the glowing lights, the barefoot boy from Manila smiled shyly. He didn't understand fame or applause. All he knew was that for one beautiful moment, his music had touched hearts far from home, and the world would never forget him. The theater was still echoing with applause when the lights dimmed again, and the golden confetti settled slowly on the stage like soft rain. Enzo stood there frozen, his tiny fingers still trembling from the final note he had played. His mother walked toward him, eyes glistening with tears, her face filled with disbelief and pride. The judges sat motionless for a few seconds, their expressions heavy with emotion. Simon Cowell, usually the most composed of them all, leaned forward, his eyes watery as he tried to form words. "You're 4 years old," he asked softly, his voice cracking slightly. Enzo nodded, shyly gripping the edge of the piano bench. "And you learned this all by yourself?" The boy's mother gently took the microphone. "We had no teacher," she said in a trembling voice. "We found a broken keyboard in a junkyard near our home in Manila. It was missing keys, but he never stopped playing. Every night he would practice on that, even when we didn't have light." He said he could still hear the music in his head. The audience fell silent again. Even the camera crew stopped moving for a moment, as though afraid to break the spell. Amanda Holden wiped her eyes openly, whispering something to Alicia Dixon, who handed her a tissue while blinking back her own tears. "You've reminded us," Amanda said, her voice shaking, "why this show exists. To find the heart behind the music." Simon glanced down, his lips pressed tightly together. He took a deep breath and looked back at the little boy standing before him. "I've been doing this for many years," he said slowly, "and I've never seen anything like that. That wasn't just music, that was life. You played like you've already lived 100 years. Before anyone could respond, he reached forward and pressed the golden buzzer. A burst of light and golden confetti shot into the air as the audience screamed with joy. The sound was deafening, yet all Enzo could hear was his heartbeat. He looked up in amazement as golden flakes fell all around him. Alessia laughed through her tears, clapping her hands. Amanda stood, shouting, "You deserve this, sweetheart." Enzo's mother knelt beside him, both of them crying and laughing together. The little boy lifted his hands to catch the confetti, his eyes wide with wonder. He had never seen anything like it. The gold, the cheers, the cameras flashing. For the first time he smiled, showing his small, uneven teeth. The entire audience rose to their feet again, chanting his name, Enzo. "Enzo, Enzo." Simon stood too, still emotional, and said into his mic, "Remember this name, everyone. You've just seen the start of something incredible." The camera zoomed in on Enzo's face as he looked toward the lights, tears shining on his cheeks, the gold dust clinging to his hair. In that moment, the poor little boy from Manila wasn't just a contestant, he was a miracle that had made the whole of Ireland believe in magic again. Back in Manila, the night was alive with noise and laughter as neighbors crowded around old televisions in small cafes and tiny living rooms. The streets buzzed with excitement. Children ran barefoot, shouting Enzo's name as the replay of his golden buzzer moment played across the screen. Mothers wept openly, fathers smiled with quiet pride, and strangers who had never met the boy felt as though he was their own. In one dimly lit alley where Enzo once practiced on his broken keyboard, a group of kids pointed to the TV in awe. "That's Enzo," one of them shouted, "the boy from our street." The camera cut back to Ireland, where Enzo stood on stage once more for the finals. His hair was neatly combed now. His small feet still bare by choice, he said shoes made him play slower. The massive audience waited in silence as he sat before the grand piano, his tiny back straight, his eyes closed. His mother stood backstage, hands clasped in prayer, whispering softly, "For Mama, Anak, play from your heart." When Enzo's fingers touched the keys, the first few notes flowed like whispers of wind through trees. It was an original piece, his own composition, which he called For Mama. The melody was soft at first, then swelled into something powerful and pure. Every chord carried a piece of his story. The sound of rain on tin roofs, the hum of traffic in Manila, the echo of his mother's lullabies when they had nothing but hope. The theater was silent. Even the cameras seemed to move slower, capturing every tear that rolled down Amanda's face. Alessia held her heart as Simon leaned back, eyes glistening, completely lost in the moment. The music filled every corner of the hall, and for those few minutes, time itself seemed to stop. When the final note faded, Enzo stayed still, his little hands resting gently on the keys. The silence that followed was sacred. Nobody dared to breathe. Then, as if the entire room shared one heartbeat, the audience rose in unison, cheering louder than ever before. People wept openly, waving small Philippine flags that had appeared throughout the crowd. Simon stood and approached the stage. He didn't speak for a while. Finally, he said, his voice trembling, "You are proof that greatness doesn't wait for age or wealth. You've shown us what music really means." His words echoed through the hall, carried by the emotion of everyone present. Amanda and Alessia hugged each other, both crying, while the audience began chanting once again, "Enzo. Enzo, Enzo." Enzo looked out at the sea of faces and lights, smiling shyly. His mother stepped forward, wrapping him in her arms as golden confetti filled the air again, shimmering under the spotlight. He raised his small hand and waved, whispering softly into her ear, "Mama, I did it." That night, the world didn't just see a child pianist, they saw the heart of a boy who turned hardship into harmony. The poor little prodigy from Manila had not only won the show, he had played his way into the soul of the world.